Good morning, White Sox fans. I'm Jim Margulis, and this is your White Sox wake-up call for June 20th, 2023. Now that the White Sox are playing like a typically frustrating middle-of-the-pack team, it feels like a lot of sentences start by mentioning how far under 500 they are. For instance, if they weren't 11 games under 500, you'd look at the White Sox 5-2 loss to the Texas Rangers on Monday night and say that they absorbed a bullpen game against the second-best team in the American League reasonably well. They trailed from the first inning onward after Tanner Banks gave up a couple of two-out hits, but Banks, Nick Padilla, and Jesse Schultens limited the Rangers to 3 runs over 6 innings, and that counts as a quality start. The offense showed up a little late, finally figuring out Andrew Heaney in the 6th inning when Andrew Vaughn and Luis Robert Jr. went back-to-back to make it a 3-2 game. Aaron Bummer just happened to give those runs back in the top of the 7th when the 4-pitch pitch round was followed by a bases-loading 4-pitch walk, and then Jonah Heim punched a single through the right side to restore Texas's lead to 3. Even then, the White Sox brought the tying run to the plate in the last 2 innings. They loaded the bases with 1 out in the 8th on 2 singles and an E5, but Josh Seabour struck out Yasmani Grandal on 3 pitches and Jake Berger after falling behind 3-0. In the 9th, Clint Frazier drew a walk against Will Smith and Elvis Andrus singled, but Zach Remillard struck out, Andrew Benintendi lined out, and Vaughn grounded out to end the game. Again, if this team hovered around 500, you'd count this one as one of the 60 losses Hawk Harrelson always said were unavoidable. But because the White Sox are now 12 games under 500, the offense can't be let off the hook, even if they treat people the way they'd like to be treated. They only mustered 2 hits and 0 walks off Heaney through 5. They didn't draw a walk until the 9th inning. They went 0 for 9 with runners in scoring position. Their last 9 homers have been solo shots, which isn't a complaint about homers, but what happens in front of them. The White Sox lineup just can't make its own luck, which is why unfortunate turns like Bummer's inning feel so especially costly, even if the odds say it's hard for a bullpen to go unscored upon over 5 1/3. So that's where they are, but because the entire division is mediocre at best, the White Sox still remain just 5.5 games out of first place, which is why these games still retain some of their sting. They'd be 19.5 games out of the AL East and 15 games back of the Rangers in the West, and that almost sounds like a huge relief. Nevertheless, we soldier on, although it doesn't get any easier tonight. Dylan Cease takes the mound for the White Sox, but last year's AL Cy Young runner-up faces a potential 2023 Cy Young finalist in Nate Eovaldi, who is 9-3 with a 2.59 ERA. The good news is that he's been touched up a little bit lately. He's given up 6 homers on the season, but half of them have come in his last 2 starts. That's a glimmer of hope for an offense that is struggling to score runs any other way. As for Cease, he's allowed just 4 runs over 3 starts in June. He just doesn't have a decision to show for it because the offense has scored a total of 8 runs over those 3 games. Inefficiency has been his only issue, so keep an eye on how many foul balls the Rangers hit to drag out at bats. First pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central on NBC Sports Chicago. A few other things to keep an eye on. Tim Anderson sat for the 2nd straight game with the right shoulder issue. Pedro Grifol says he's day-to-day and reports were good, but I'm inclined to think this is just as much a mental break. Speaking of shortstops, we'll also see if Jose Rodriguez makes his MLB debut. The White Sox called him up on Monday afternoon to replace Romy Gonzalez, who is back on the IL with his own shoulder issue. Rodriguez sounds like he'll be around to replace Gonzalez as a late-inning replacement option, which makes it more of an emergency depth move en route to a minor league promotion, similar to the way Lenyn Sosa was briefly called up from Birmingham last year, then optioned to Charlotte. Down on the farm, all of the White Sox full-season affiliates had the Monday off as usual, but that allows us to skip right ahead to Colson Montgomery, who finally made his 2023 debut in the Arizona Complex League on Monday night. Montgomery has been sidelined with a back injury, and his timetable had been cloudy at best, so it was good to see him back in action. He started at DH, batted leadoff, and went 1 for 4. He lined out and tripled off rehabbing Royal Ryan Yarbrough, then flied out to left and reached on an error in his other 2 plate appearances. The ACL White Sox won 4-2, with Ryan Burroughs going 2 for 4 with a triple that drove in Montgomery. The Dominican Summer League White Sox were the other active affiliate, and they lost to the Padres Brown squadron 13-6. D'Angelo Tejada went 2 for 5 with 2 doubles, and Abraham Nunez was 2 for 4 with 1 double. The full season squad start fresh series tonight. Charlotte hosts Louisville. Birmingham travels to Mississippi. Winston-Salem travels down I-40 to face rival Greensboro, and Kannapolis heads home to take on Myrtle Beach. Around the league, the AL Central is back to 5 losing records. The Twins got tripled up by the Red Sox 9-3 as Pablo Lopez fell apart after the Twins rallied to tie the game after 5. Minnesota is now 36-37, leading the division by 2 games over idle Cleveland. The Tigers beat the Royals 6-4, so they're in 3rd place at 4 games back, with the White Sox 5.5 out. In more impressive numbers, Luis Arraez had an Arby's night, going 5 for 5 to lead the Marlins to an 11-0 shutout over Toronto. His average is back to an even 400, and Jorge Soler hit his 21st homer as well. The surging Reds got Joey Votto back, and all he did in his first game of 2023 was deliver a 2-run single that scored the decisive run to extend Cincinnati's winning streak to 9 games. They beat the Rockies 5-4 and are now leading the NL Central by a half game since Milwaukee lost to the Diamondbacks 9-1. The Cubs shut out the Pirates 8-0 to keep pace at 3.5 back. In other scores, Max Scherzer pitched 8 innings of 1-run ball in an 11-1 rout of the Astros, which they sorely needed, and the Giants beat the Padres 7-4 in 10 innings on a walk-off homer by Mike Yastrzemski. San Francisco has won 8 straight. That'll do it for this edition of the White Sox Wake Up Call. Visit SoxMachine.com to talk about the game, Montgomery's debut in the minor keys, and I'll have a post discussing Rick Hahn's touchy reaction to speculation about Pedro Grifal's future. Speaking of future, make sure to listen to the Future Sox podcast, which features Baseball America's Bill Mitchell talking about the first revision of their top 30 White Sox prospects list. If you are new to the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to us wherever podcasts are found. And if you like what we do, you can support us at patreon.com/SoxMachine, where you can get an ad-free version of the site and show and bonus content, including an upcoming P.O. Sox mailbag. Plans start at $2 a month. Thanks for listening to the Sox Machine podcast. For SoxMachine.com, I'm Jim Margulis.